Hi guys, my name's Vanessa Smedley and I'm a painter. Well, I just got back from a lovely vacation in St. Augustine, Florida, and we are going to paint one of their famous landmarks. This is the Castillo de San Marcos, and it is the oldest fort in America. It's a very, very cool place to visit, so we're going to paint that. It's got lots of rock textures and some water and all kinds of cool stuff, so let's do this. The fort was finished in 1695 by the Spanish. It took many, many years to build this thing. And it was the very first permanent European settlement in the continental United States. It is built out of coquina, which is a sedimentary limestone that is native to Florida. I have a sample of it here, and it's actually made out of just crushed seashells over the centuries. It fuses together into this stone. But enough history lesson, let's get started. Here are the materials for today. As usual, you can either screenshot that or they are listed in the description of the video for you. I'm going to start out by using some masking fluid to mask around the entire building here. I really just don't want to have to paint around it. So I'm dipping my brush, which is an old brush, into a solution of water and liquid dish soap, and then into the masking fluid. But please wash your brush right after or you will absolutely ruin it. After this dried, I went back in with a tiny little eraser and I am rubbing off some of that masking fluid so that the sky will show through the window. I'm starting out with the sky, so I have Cobalt Blue here, and first I'm actually going to take my Hake brush and wet the entire sky area and then all the way down to the water as well. I'm making it a little bit darker towards the top of the sky. That is just an atmospheric effect that you will always have. It'll be darker at the top and a little bit lighter towards the horizon line. Now I'm going to let that dry and mix up some more colors. I'm going to mix up some lovely greens for the trees. So I am starting out with Hooker's Green and then adding some burnt umber in and some alizarin crimson to gray it down a little bit further. And then for a more yellowy green, I'm going to start out with Sap Green and add in some burnt umber to kind of take the artificial look out of it. I'm going to take the Hooker's Green mix and I'm going to run that all the way across with that tree line in the background. I'm going to make it a little bit lighter at the top, and then I'm going to add in some extra pigment to the bottom to create shadows. I've allowed the pigment to settle into the paper for a little bit, maybe a couple minutes, and now I'm going to come back in with a palette knife and I'm going to scrape in some of the details in the background, which is just like all of these white stucco buildings. And I mean, I say detail, but to be honest with you, it's really just little scrapes because it's so far in the background, you would not be able to see the detail anyway, so this is just a suggestion of those buildings. Next, I have two mixtures of burnt umber and Payne's gray, one a little bit more to the brown side and the other a little bit more to the gray side, and we're going to use that for all of this masonry. I'm going to go ahead and use both of those colors to add in this outer wall here. Next, I'm adding some indigo into my Cobalt Blue, and we're going to use that for the water. So I have a dry mixture of that on my brush, and I am just skimming that across the top of the paper, and that is making a dry brush effect. And that just helps to create some of that kind of sparkling water effect. And as it gets closer to the viewer of the painting, I'm making the ripples in the water more obvious, because in the distance you wouldn't see them as much. Closer up, you'll see them. In the this entire foreground area, that's going to be sand and then grass on the edges. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint the whole thing as sand, wetting the entire area first, and then I'm using a very, very, very watered down version of just burnt umber for the sand. I'm going to let that dry and then come back and do more detail on top of it later. Now that that's dry, I'm using my Sap Green mixture and I'm dry brushing that along the edges where all of the grasses have kind of grown in and encroached on this area. So I'm making sure that the edges are definitely kind of rough. And then I'm going to bring back in the darker of my greens to add like some more texture and some shadows once this kind of gets all blocked in. Then I use a damp brush to lift out a little bit of that area so that my tree trunks won't have to be so dark when I come back in, because, you know, palm tree trunks are kind of light. They're not really that dark. Then I add a few more ripples to my water, and then I'm going to mix up a little bit of Payne's Gray into my burnt umber mixture. And this is all still very watery, and I'm dry brushing in some more details in the sand. I'm also just randomly using some burnt sienna to add in some of these Spanish tile roofs in the background here. I feel like that's an important detail for St. Augustine. Off camera, I removed all of my masking fluid with a rubber cement eraser, just so you wouldn't have to watch me do that. And now I am covering the entire fort with a layer of water so that I can begin to drop in some of this color. So I start out with my mix that's more brown, cover the entire area with that, and then I add in the color that has more Payne's Gray in it in certain splotchy areas. I add in some yellow ochre in certain areas and some more like burnt umber in certain areas. I mean, rock texture is pretty much a free-for-all for colors, so I'm just dropping in whatever I feel like it, to be honest with you. I'm just making sure that it's darker on this left side, because that's the side that's in shadow. And we're going to follow the same process on this flat surface of the wall. Next, I'm going to paint in these palm trunks by using one of my browns here, and then I'm going to use a damp brush to lift out some highlights on the right side. Now that that entire fort area has dried, I'm coming back in to add detail to it. So I'm using the grayer of the colors because this whole thing has pretty much of a gray tone to it. I'm darkening in the windows, darkening in the shadow side, which is on the left for this whole entire thing here, and then darkening it on the ledges that are darker, and then that whole left panel. Next, I'm going to darken up this entire left panel here, and that's going to show you the shadow. I'm using a lot of dry brushing. I'm going back and forth between different colors. I'm adding some darker areas for the weathered aspects of the building, because you'll see these patches of like dark all over it, and that's just from centuries and centuries worth of weathering. Next, to add some texture, I'm taking an old credit card that I don't use anymore and I'm scraping into that paint. Next, we're going to use the same sort of process of dry brushing on this other side, but it is going to be much, much lighter because this is the side that's facing the sun. Now that that's dried, I'm looking at it and I think the lighter side is a little bit too light because it's not dark enough in relation to the sky. So I'm coming back in and I'm darkening up the sunny side. I just don't want to make it as dark as the other side. Next, we're going to paint in our spiky palm trees. So I'm going to start with my lighter of my greens. I'm going to get that all situated how I want to, and then I'm going to come back in with my darker green and add in the shadows that differentiate these two trees from one another. I'm also adding some of my brown mixture at the bottom because that's where the dried up leaves end up hanging down like that. I love St. Augustine. I really do. I've been there many times over the years, but I do want to give you one piece of warning. If you are a plein air painter and like to paint outdoors, it is illegal in the city of St. Augustine to do so. It actually can be a criminal offense and can land you in jail for 60 days with a $500 fine as well. So do be careful, artists. I mean, it's supposed to be only certain areas of downtown that it's illegal, but I hear conflicting information on that, so it's probably better to be safer than sorry. Which is really sad because I consider that a freedom of speech violation, but I don't know. Next, I'm going to use my darker of the greens and come back in and add some more detail into the grass area. Next, we need to do the shadows for the palm trees, and I've started out with the green on the grass area, and then I've switched over to a brown on the sand area. Then I'm just going to add some more detail and texture into the walls section. It's time for fun facts about the fort. Now, I told you that it was made out of coquina, but what I didn't mention is that that rock is what made this place such a formidable fortress. Since it was built with this rock that was made out of tiny little seashells, it would basically just absorb the impact from cannonballs rather than splitting into pieces like any normal rock would. And so overnight, the Spanish would just patch all of the cannonball holes, and so the next morning their enemies would wake up and be like, "Where are all the cannonballs we hit them with? This place is invincible." So it was a little bit of psychological warfare in that way. Now that the building has dried, I think we need a little bit more detail darkening and definitely filling in the windows and things like that. So I'm going back through and adding all of that in right now. I'm going to add little patches of green on the side of the building here because you'll notice that there are intervals of little downspouts on the side of the building where it drains onto the building itself, and you'll see like little plants growing there. Like I saw ferns growing on the side of the building where all that water comes through. So I thought that was an important detail to add. I think we could use a tiny bit more definition in our palm trees, in the closest ones anyway. So I'm coming back in with my darker green and adding in a little bit more sharpness. One more fact about this fort is that it did change hands several times over the years. I mean, the Spanish had it for hundreds of years, then the British had it for a while, and then the Americans had it. But the interesting thing is that it was never taken by force. It was always given over in treaties. So that shows you how much of an absolute rock of a fortress this place was. It was never taken. Alright, we are on the final round of detail adding, so I have my tiny little Posca Pen and I'm adding in some of those grout lines between the bricks and things like that, and some of the highlights, just the final little details on the thing. And here's the finished product, all dried and with the tape removed and signed and all that kind of stuff. It's a very cool place. If you're ever in St. Augustine, I think you should check it out. And not just from the outside, you need to go inside and check it out as well. And there you have it, a journey through time and space to a really cool old fort. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, all of that stuff, because that's how this channel gets to grow. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again in 2 weeks.